We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph from Meseches Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 49a. The Gemara says, Meisvei, we have the following question from a Brisa. Zor, if you have a non-Kohen v'onin, that's somebody whose relative just died. Shikr, somebody who's drunk. Ubal mum, or somebody who has a blemish. Bekabola uveholacha uvezrika pasal. When it comes to receiving the blood, when it comes to walking the blood towards the Mizbeach, when it comes to sprinkling the blood, in all these situations, it is pasal. And the Brisa says, V'chein yoshev. The same is true if a person is sitting down, the person needs to be standing up to do it. V'chein small, and the same thing is true if a person does it with the left hand, you have to do it with the right hand. And this is a question of what we said before. We said before that holacha b'smol is fine. And so it says again, pasal, in all of these situations, it's pasal. So the Gemara says, you're right, Tiyufta, this is a refutation. In other words, we said before it was good. Here from this brisa, it appears clear that it is pasal. You're not allowed to do the holacha with the left hand. So the Gemara now asks, Rav Sheshes Huda Osva. But Rav Sheshes himself uses this brisa that we just quoted to ask a question we'll see in one moment. So Rav Sheshes knew the brisa. So how could it be that Rav Sheshes knew this brisa and he also made the same mistake, thinking that the left hand is okay? And where do we see that Rav Sheshes knew the brisa? The Amar le Rav Sheshes la Amore de Rav Chisda, because Rav Sheshes said to the interpreter of Rav Chisda, Boy mi name Rav Chisda. They asked Rav Chisda the following question. Holacha bizar mahu. They asked him, what's the halacha? Again, if you do holacha, you carry the blood towards the mizbeach, and you're a non-kohen. What's the halacha? Amar lei said to him, ksheira, it's kosher. Umikra misayeni, and there's a pasuk that supports me. This is a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. It says, vayishchetu ha-pesach, vayizriku ha-kohanim miyadam. It says they shechted the pesach, and the kohanim did the sprinkling of the blood from their hands. V'alaviyim mafshitim. And then it says that the Leviyim, they took apart the animals, they stripped off the hides of the animals. So Rashi over here says, Vayizriku HaKohanim Hadam Miyodam Shel Shochtim. In other words, they took the blood from the hands of the Shochtim, Shehem Zarim. The Shochtim were Zarim, Shechazru V'kiblu Hadam Miyad HaKohen HaMekabel V'holichu El HaZorek. And these Zarim, they're the ones that brought it to the person who was sprinkling the blood. They did the holacha. So what Rav Chisda is saying is, from this pasuk, you already see clearly that the holacha can be done by the Zarim. So he said it shows a proof from the pasuk. Most of Rav Sheshes, and on that whole conversation, Rav Sheshes asked the question from the brisa we just had above. It says, Zar va'onen shikru balmum bekabolo v'olacha uvizrika pasal v'chein yoshe v'chein small pasal. Again, one of the people on this list is a non-kohen, is pasal to do the kabbalah, the holacha, and the zrika. It includes holacha. So what's going on? If Rav Sheshes knew this brisa, why does he not realize it? Why is he saying that the left hand is okay? And the Gemara answers simply, Basar deshama hadar osva. After he heard the brisa, then he realized he was incorrect about the left hand, and then he asked the question on Rav Chisda. He said, don't you see from this brisa as well that a zar is not allowed to do the holacha? And the Gemara says, Va Rav Chisda krak amar. But Rav Chisda brought a pasuk to support himself. What do we do with this pasuk? Again, this pasuk over here in Divrei Hayamim, Vayishchetu ha-pesach, Vayizriku ha-kohanim miyadam, V'alaviyim mashitim, that was the proof that Rav Chisda brought that holacha bizar is ksheira. So what do we do with that pasuk? And the Gemara answers, the Ovid Maisa Itztava. In that pasuk, it doesn't mean they actually did holacha. They just acted like a bench. They just held on to the blood. Rashi says, Maisa Itztava, again, they acted like a bench. HaMekablim hayu moshivim es hadam biyad hazarim. Those who receive the blood would simply put it in the hands of the non-kohanim. Ve'ein hazarim mekarven osol etzad mizbeach klal. But the zarim, they wouldn't take it closer to the mizbeach. They wouldn't do actual holacha. Ela moshivim hadam al yadim. They would just put it on their hands. Kasher agab itztava. They would just hold the blood just as if it would be on a bench. And the Gemara continues, Boy, Rav Papa asked the following question. Chafan Chavero, let's say the Kohen Gadol's friend, he's the one that scoops up the handfuls of the Ketores, and then he puts it into the hands of the Kohen Gadol. Ma, what's the halacha? Malo chafnav, but he needs to fill his hands, v'ha'ika, and that's what he's doing. Or Dilmar, maybe v'lokach v'hevi, but he needs to take it and bring it. He needs to be the one to scoop it up himself. V'haleka, and that's not happening over here. Take what the Gemara leaves it as a question. Boy, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi asks a question. Chafan v'meis mahu she'yikonis acher b'chafinaso. What happens if the Kohen Gadol takes up the handfuls and then he dies? Can somebody else enter and use the same incense? Rashi over here says, Ma'u she'yikonis acher Kohen ha'mishamish tachtav, meaning the Kohen Gadol who takes over for this first Kohen Gadol. Ma'u she'yikonis lifnim b'chafina zu shenasan arishon l'soch hakaf. Can he use the same ketores that the first guy put inside the spoon? Ve'ein sarach lachzor v'lachvan. He doesn't need to go and take a handful again. That's again the question of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Bo re'ei she'elas harishonim. Come and see the question of the earlier generations. Rashi says, Amar Rabbi Chanina l'talmidim. Rabbi Chanina said to his students, Bo re'ei sha'ador ha'acharon zoche le'eschakim kedoros harishonim. Look at how the later generation is just as wise as the earlier one in this regard. Because I also asked the same question. And now we see that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, who's older than me, he asked the same question. He's one of the Rishonim. So Rabbi Chanina was saying, I asked this very same question, and look, it's been asked by the earlier generation. The Gemara now interrupts and says, L'meimra de Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi kashish. Do you mean to say that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is older than Rabbi Chanina? We have a story that has the opposite. V'yomer Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, but Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, Li hitter Rabbi Chanina lishtos shechlayim b'Shabbos. It says that Rabbi Chanina allowed me to drink cress on Shabbos. It wasn't a problem of refuah, of medicine on Shabbos. So it sounds like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is saying, Rabbi Chanina allowed me to do it, meaning Rabbi Chanina is the older one. The Gemara again interrupts. The Gemara says, lishtos, to drink it on Shabbos, pshita, isn't that obvious? Of course you could drink it on Shabbos. What's even the question? The Tanan, because we learned in a Mishnah, a person can eat any food for refuah purposes. A person can drink any drink for refuah purposes. So of course you could drink the shechlayim on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, you're right, the question was, can he grind it and drink it on Shabbos? And that's what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was saying, that Rabbi Chanina allowed him to do that as well, to grind it as well. The Gemara says, okay, but still, hechidami, what's the case? Idika sakanta mishroshari. If there's a real danger to life, of course it's permitted. Vidaleka sakanta meisar aser. And if there's no danger to life, of course it's not allowed. So the Gemara says, liolam diika sakanta. Really, there was a danger to life. Vahachi kami boile. And he was asking the following question: Mi masya, is this something that is going to heal? The nechol alayo Shabbos, which of course would mean that we can be mechal Shabbos with it, meaning it's not considered chilul Shabbos because it's saving a life. Lo masir, maybe this isn't medicine at all, it's not going to heal. V'lo nechol alayo Shabbos, so we can't be mechal Shabbos and grind this and drink this particular cress. So that was really the question. In other words, he was asking him a medical question more than asking him a halacha question. Gemara says, okay, u'ma'ishna Rabbi Chanina, but if that's the case, why are you asking Rabbi Chanina a medical question? That doesn't make sense either. So the Gemara says, Mishum debaki b'refuah. So Rabbi Chanina was an expert when it came to medicine. The Yoma Rabbi Chanina, because Rabbi Chanina said this is just an example showing that Rabbi Chanina makes statements when it comes to healing. Rabbi Chanina said, Me'olam lo sheiloni adam al makas preido levana v'choya. A person never asked me, let's say the person was kicked by a white mule, a person never showed me such a thing and lived. In other words, it's very dangerous to be in such a situation. And Rabbi Chanina said, I never saw somebody live from such a wound. Gemara says, what are you talking about? We see that people have lived from such wounds. So the Gemara says, Ema v'choyis. No, what he was really saying was the wound never heals. It's possible the person will survive, but the wound will never heal. Gemara says, still, we see that the wound does heal. We have cases where it has healed. So the Gemara says, Besumkon inu v'chivran reish kara'ayu. We're talking about a very particular kind of mule. We're talking about a mule which is red, and the upper part of the leg is going to be white. That kind, klamrina, and that's what we're talking about when we say that the wound does not heal. In any case, the Gemara says, Mikol makam shmami nad Rabbi Chanina kashish. In any case, from this entire story, don't we see that Rabbi Chanina is actually older than Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi? So how do we explain what Rabbi Chanina was saying when he was saying, if Rabbi Chanina is the one that is older, it seemed like the opposite before. Rabbi Chanina was saying Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was older. This is the question of the earlier generations. So the Gemara says, here's really what Rabbi Chanina meant. He meant, in general, your question is like the question of the earlier generations. And Rashi over here explains, here's really what Rabbi Chanina was saying. Rabbi Chanina letalmidav. Rabbi Chanina was saying to his students, Bo ure'eh she'elosan shel achronim kishe'elosi. Look and see how this later question of the Achronim is like mine. Sha'ani min harishonim. He was saying, I'm from the earlier generations. Sha'afani ha'yisi miskasha. Because I had the same question. So in other words, just reverse it. Rabbi Chanina was saying he's from the earlier generations, and he's asked this question as well. And the Gemara continues, Umi Amar Rabbi Chanina hachi. Does Rabbi Chanina really say this? Rashi over here says, Umi Amar Rabbi Chanina hachi mi mesafka lei inichnas acher b'chafinaso imlo. Was Rabbi Chanina really in doubt whether somebody else can take the handfuls of the Kohen Gadol who died or not? Did he even have such a question? It can't be at such a question. V'yamar Rabbi Chanina, but Rabbi Chanina said, "Bepar velo bedamo shel par." Person has to enter with the bull and not with the blood of the bull. We'll see what that means. V'yamar Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina also said, "Ketorah shechafna kodem shchidas hapar." If a person does the ketoras, takes the handfuls before shechting the bull, lo asav velo klum, it's not good, and so that should already answer the question, as Rashi here explains. Bepar velo bedamo shel par, meaning bezos yavo Aaron el hakodesh. Bepar, it says that Aaron will come to the Kodesh with a bull. V'lo b'damo shel par, not with the blood of a bull, meaning, Shem shachat paro v'meis, let's say the Kohen Gadol shechts the par and dies, Eina meshamish tachtav nichnas ba'oso dam lefnim. The person who's serving instead, the new Kohen Gadol, can't take that same blood. El etzarach lavi par acher v'lishchad. He's going to need to take a new bull, and he's going to need to shecht it new. And the halach is once you need to take a new bull, you need to take new handfuls after the shechita, as we said. Because you're not allowed to do the ketores handfuls before the shechita. You got to do it after the shechita. See, if you have to do a new shechita, you're going to have to do a new handfuls of the ketores as well. Shekain seder havodas. You got to do it in the order of the avoda. So therefore it comes out if a person, the Kohen Gadol, took the handfuls and died also. It's impossible. Obviously, he shechted his own bull first. And now the new Kohen Gadol is going to need to bring a new bull. And if he's allowed to take the handfuls of the first Kohen Gadol, comes out that the handfuls were taken before the shechting of the second bull, which obviously won't be good. So therefore it's clear, according to Rabbi Chanina, you're not allowed to take the chafina of the previous Kohen Gadol. So why is Rabbi Chanina saying, I had the exact same question? So the Gemara answers, Hachi Ka'amar, here's what Rabbi Chanina is saying. From the fact that you have such a question, sounds like you hold that when it comes to a bull, you could enter with just the blood of the bull. In other words, according to, just from the fact that you're asking the question, sounds like you hold the second Kohen Gadol would not need to shecht a new par. And according to that, if that's what you really hold, you're asking a question of the earlier generations, meaning those who held that. Rabbi Chanina himself doesn't hold like that. But those who held afilu b'dama shel par, they also had such a question. Rashi over here says, from the fact Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi has this question, sounds like you don't need to bring a new par. Obviously, if you did have to bring a new par, you'd have a problem of doing the ketoris before the shchitas hapar. And according to that, it's a good question. That's like the earlier generations. Meaning those who argued with me when it came to the bull, they said you could take the blood of the bull. They also had this question. So he wasn't saying he himself had the question, but he was saying, according to your premise, this is a question of the earlier generations. And the Gemara says, "My have Allah." So what is the conclusion? Meaning, if the Kohen Gadol takes the handfuls and he dies, can somebody else use his handful of ketoris or not? And so the Gemara answers, Amar of Papa says, "Ichofen choser v'chofen." If we hold that when a person takes the handfuls, you have to do another handful when you actually get into the Kodesh Kodashim, this is a question we mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to discuss it now. If you hold you have to take another handful in the Kodesh Kodashim, so then chaver nichnas b'chafinaso. Then it's no problem for the second Kohen Gadol to use the handfuls of the first Kohen Gadol because he'll fulfill the halacha of handfuls when he's in the Kodesh Kodashim. However, if a Kohen Gadol does not have to do a second handful in the Kodesh Kodashim, then we indeed have a question. And Rashi over here explains, if we're going to answer our question, because it was a general question, when it comes to the handfuls inside the Kodesh Kodashim, is there halacha you have to do the handful again in the Kodesh Kodashim? Or is there no such halacha? You don't have to do anything more. It's already brought in the spoon, it's enough. And if you're going to say that there's a halacha of taking the handful of incense again in the Kodesh Kodashim, so then it's no problem. Then the second one can use the handful of the first Kohen Gadol, because he'll fulfill his own chafina in the Kodesh Kodashim. But again, if there is no chafina in the Kodesh Kodashim, so then we really have a question. Gemara says, Amar le Rav Huna b'reider Rav Yoshua Rav Papa. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, said to Rav Papa, Adarab, on the contrary, Ichofen v'chozer v'chofen, if there's a halach of taking the handfuls again in the Kodesh Kodashim, lo yikanis acher b'chafinaso, some other person shouldn't enter with the first Kohen Gadol's handfuls, because the handfuls are going to be different amounts. It's impossible that it's not going to be a little less or a little more. You won't be able to do it properly in the Kodesh Kodashim. V'ein chofer v'chozer v'chofen, but if the halach is you don't have to take the handful again, ein chofein choser v'chofein, if you don't do another handful in the Kodesh Kodashim, then that's when we should have the question, because now in such a situation it's not going to be a problem anymore. You don't need to take a second handful, not a problem having too much or too little. So the question is, can you rely on the first handful? Rashi over here says, Adarabba, if there's going to be another taking of the handfuls in the Kodesh Kodashim, then the second Kohen Gadol shouldn't use the first Kohen Gadol's handfuls. The two handfuls are not going to be equal. There's going to be something either missing or a little extra, and that's going to be a problem. And now the Gemara says, Di boilu, because this was a general question. Chofin, choser, v'chofin, olo. Is there a halacha that you take the handful again in the Kodesh Kodashim, or that's not a halacha? Tashma, the Gemara says, come in here. Kachoisa midasa. It says this was the midah of the spoon. It's talking about the fact the spoon that holds the ketores was equal in measure to the handfuls of the Kohen Gadol. They made it the same amount. So the Gemara says, my lav, what does this mean in the Mishnah? Kishem shemidasa mibachutz, kach midasa mibifnim. Doesn't it mean the same measure that was on the outside is the same measure on the inside? And this was the same proof the Gemara brought a little earlier when we mentioned this question. The proof is it's the exact same measure, meaning you don't need to take another handful. The measure in the spoon is enough. So the Gemara says, lo, no, dilma she'imrotza lasos mida osa. Maybe what it really means, the Mishnah is, kachoisa midasa, if you want to make, instead of taking handfuls, if you want to just make a spoon with the exact same measurement as the Kohen Gadol's handfuls, that's okay. You don't need to actually physically take the handfuls with the hand. You can use a kli. That could be what the Mishnah means. Inami, or maybe the Mishnah has another meaning altogether. Shelo yechzer v'shelo yosir. Maybe the Mishnah means to say, you can't have less, you can't have more. It has to be exact. And so again, there's no proof from this Mishnah that you don't take the handfuls again in the Kodesh Kodashim. So the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here, another proof, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memtes Amud Beis.